Assassin's Creed Syndicate is a game that I was genuinely surprised by.
In some ways, it tries hard to recapture the mystique of the older entries in the franchise. And in some regards, it succeeds. Syndicate also tries to implement its own innovations, which would have been cool if they were left in the oven just a little bit longer. While the DNA of Assassin's Creed Syndicate is good, and at moments it really does feel like you're almost back in the heyday of the series, it does fall short of greatness through no fault of its own. Had Ubisoft allowed this game to become more refined, Syndicate probably would have been one of the best games in the Assassin's Creed series. Assassin's Creed Syndicate was released on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC in 2015. I'm playing the PS4 version. Let's dive in. Syndicate opens with a bit of a bait and switch. You're first introduced to the twin protagonists, Jacob and Evie Fry, and a generic, douchey assassin that immediately demands a collective sigh. Luckily, Evie and Jacob ditch the loser, and we're off to London.
You know, Jacob Fry, you might just be right.
Then shall we?
Yes. Let's. Onward to London.
London is under Templar control, and an enterprising villain, Starrick, is at the helm. Starrick is looking for a piece of Eden hidden within London, which he plans to use to gain an even stronger grip on the city. Now it's up to Jacob and Evie to recapture London with the help of another assassin, Mr. Green, and keep Starrick from seizing the piece of Eden for himself. The tale of Syndicate is fairly by the numbers. There aren't many surprises, but the characters of Jacob and Evie are really enjoyable. Jacob is brash, overconfident, and a bit of a prat. The story attempts to make Jacob into a sort of James Bond type character. You know, men want to be him, women want to be with him. In that regard, Syndicate succeeds. Jacob is charming, and it is fun to see what he'll get into next. Evie, on the other hand, is much more stoic. She wants to have a plan, and she wants to follow it. The thing that limits Evie's character is that's about all you'll see of her nature. She never shows an impulsive side. She never has a moment where she must throw caution to the wind and go in guns blazing. Personally, I would have preferred their personalities switched. To have a female assassin who was arrogant and blusterous would have been a good change of pace for the series. The story does do a major disservice to Evie in another way. There's a romance shoehorned in at the very last moment of the story. There is no build-up beforehand. For a character who's so guarded, to suddenly fall in love with someone is really patronizing to the character as well as the audience. Having two protagonists in theory would have made it much easier to have a more concise story, but Jacob ends up taking most of the oxygen in this tale. It felt like Jacob's story took well over half of the playtime in the campaign. In some ways, I wonder if there was more content planned for the story, but it was cut due to performance of previous games in the series. One of the cool things about the story is that it does connect back to Black Flag's main character, Edward Kenway. I love that they referenced him, and it does add a level of cohesion that I can't recall in another Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed Syndicate's two protagonists means two playable characters. I love that you could change between Jacob and Evie on the fly. Jacob is meant to be a brawler, and Evie is stealthier. Both characters' skill trees are almost identical though, but switching between Jacob and Evie does give you the opportunity to have different loadouts for both characters. It took me some time to get acclimated to the combat, but once I did, I felt I was just as strong as the good old days with Connor or Ezio. The one thing that I did have a hard time getting used to was breaking an opponent's guard. Some of the kill animations take a little too long as well. The weapons in Syndicate all felt unique to me. The guns especially felt necessary, and I loved the brass knuckles. There are some bare knuckle fighting events that were challenging and a nice change of pace. The major gameplay addition of Assassin's Creed Syndicate is a zipline. This is one of the things that I thought would really help change the Assassin's Creed tried and true formula to help you feel more mobile. I do like the addition of the zipline. Unfortunately, the zipline does not live up to the standards we've come to expect with games like Just Cause and the Batman Arkham series. The zipline is unreliable. It can only attach itself to specified surfaces, and I couldn't get it to work consistently when I was in a pinch. Interestingly, I did play Syndicate much more like an Arkham game though, assassinating an unsuspecting goon, then quickly retreating to higher ground to watch how the rest of the gang would react. The other major addition is with the carriages.
Well, what say you? You're not gonna like it.
I hate these things. The control is janky, and as you can see, I never quite got the hang of it. Stealth is much more necessary than in some of the previous games. Smoke bombs are clutch in many situations. The AI is quite aggressive during open combat, but give up pretty easily if you run. Additionally, I love that the whistle is back. For some reason, I like luring thug after thug to a corner just to pop out and waste them. Lastly, I enjoyed during the assassination missions. There are some very cool unique kill opportunities that feel well thought out. Some missions are better designed than others though. There were several occasions where I was trying to play smart, but just going in like a bull in a china shop worked much better. The graphics department of Syndicate is a bit of a step down from its predecessors, but it is a looker, and better yet, it's stable. I know that many were not excited about the location of Syndicate, but I was. Industrial Revolution England is my jam. The almost steampunk aesthetic that both Jacob and Evie were designed with are perfect for the setting. One disappointment for me was the lack of customization Evie and Jacob have in their appearance. I really would have liked to mix and match more of their costumes to create something a little more unique. The antagonist of Syndicate, Starrick, looks seriously fiendish. The curly mustache and slick back hair make him look like a grim customer. The patrician denizens Jacob and Evie meet as they navigate the power centers of the Big Smoke are well designed, if not a little generic. Many of the lower class citizens of the city are reused often, which has been a major criticism of the game. Personally, I don't notice it much. London looks fantastic. Of course, there are the major landmarks of the city, but what I like even better is the unfinished buildings and dingy factories that litter the city. It gives the player an impression of London being alive and on the grow. Syndicate adds another interesting flair to the architecture: advertising. I love all the products that are trying to catch the passerby's eye. This makes London feel distinct from other cities in the series. Dividing the city is the Thames, which is full of paddle wheelers and tugboats, giving you a sense of place not only via the architecture in the city, but the maritime commerce that London was known for at the time. The train stations, on the other hand, create a sort of dead space as you traverse the city. These massive buildings are bursting with activity much like the Thames, with trains going in and out and folks trying to catch them. However, on the top of these structures, they are just glass panes, and there isn't much interesting here. The lighting in Syndicate fits the time period and geographic location of the game. There are rarely bright sunny days. Instead, most days are foggy, with a dingy, smoke-filled sky, or rain plip-plopping on the stone streets of London. I would have loved to see the story have a winter section. Snow on the rooftops and dirty slush on the streets would have been very cool. The sound of Assassin's Creed Syndicate is up to the standard we've come to expect. The 3D sound design is excellent, making it simple to place where enemies are. The clash of steel and the bang of guns are convincing. I especially like the sound of the cane you attack enemies with. The ring of wood against the forehead of some thug is visceral. The most standout sounds in my book is the hand-to-hand combat sections during the Fight Club missions. The smack, thwack, and crack of Jacob or Evie's fists against the hoods of London sound great. The music in Syndicate by Austin Wintory is enjoyable. The opening track, Bloodlines, sets an excellent tone for the OST, and many of the sounds explored in the hour-and-a-half experience are found in the first moments of this soundtrack. The violin is central to many of the compositions. It makes for a nice lead, and the rest of the accompaniments come off as subtle. There are some lovely piano sections weaving in and out of the tracks, and that adds an excellent contrast to the string sections. There are some tracks with plucky string sections that conjure up a chugging locomotive. Accompanying these tracks are claps, and occasional heavy percussion of metal, adding a sharp distinction. Deep timpani blasts add movement to these songs that are suitable for a lumbering steel giant. When the action heats up, the sound shifts expertly into an action score that feels in step with the conventional aesthetic, while simultaneously feeling like a departure from the now established tone. There are some excellent vocalized tracks that give the listener a somber, muted, and all-around English feeling. Not all of the vocals are restrained though. One track in particular I felt was questionable with vocal direction. Overall, I loved all the instrumental tracks. Much like other aspects of Syndicate, the soundtrack is a little bit short, leaving you before you're ready for it to go. Of course, the voice acting is top-notch. Jacob is cheeky, and Evie is stoic. The villain of the game, Crawford Starrick, delivers a perfect performance for a character that is fundamentally volatile.
Mr. Starrick!
I told you not to disturb me! Till break your own to see.
Assassin's Creed Syndicate took me about 20 hours to complete. The difficulty was a bit higher than I experienced in recent games in the series. This is due to my playstyle though. Generally, I'm a run and gun player, and Syndicate doesn't reward that playstyle. You can pick up Syndicate for about $15 used, and that's a good bang for your buck. If you've grown tired of the Assassin's Creed formula, don't play this game. There isn't anything here to change your mind. If you can't decide between Unity and Syndicate, play Unity. Unity is a far more ambitious game, and while playing Syndicate, you can tell that the developers abandoned ship early. Ubisoft didn't give Syndicate the polish it well deserved. It could have been a huge splash. In the end, Syndicate went down as the second lowest selling Assassin's Creed game, Rogue being the worst selling of them all. When I first heard about Syndicate, I was excited by the time period and some of the innovations in gameplay. To be honest, I wish that this series was continuing down the path set forth by the game. I was hoping that the series would finally be getting to the modern era, perhaps a game set during World War I in Warsaw, in Russia as the Soviet Union came to power, or LA in the 1950s. Now that Assassin's Creed Origins has taken the timeline back to the beginning, who knows where the series will go next? I definitely plan on playing Origins once it gets a price drop. Nonetheless, I feel that while there are some issues with the Assassin's Creed formula, it has been improving. Let's hope that Ubisoft doesn't remove the enhancements Syndicate made, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. This is Zach with Tanuki Games. Please remember that a like, a comment, or a subscribe means a lot to me, and of course, the channel.
There will
Enjoy.
be inflation, riots, manufacturing will jump to America for the cheap labor. In short, Britain is done for.
Jacob, you've really put your foot in it now.